My sister laughed so loudly that people at the next table turned to look. She didn't even try to lower her voice. She pointed straight at me, her wine glass hovering in the air, and said, "She's not blood family." For half a second, no one reacted. Forks froze mid-air. Conversations around us stumbled into silence. I remember thinking how strange it was that a room full of strangers could suddenly feel smaller than my own chest. Then she pushed a small gift box toward me across the white tablecloth. "Open it," she said, smiling like she was doing me a favor. When I lifted the lid and saw the DNA test kit inside, the silence became absolute. No one laughed. No one moved. Even the waiter standing a few feet away pretended not to see us. That was the moment I understood this wasn't a joke. It wasn't drunk talk. It was a declaration. And whatever game my sister thought she was playing, she had just made me the centerpiece. My name is Megan Foster. I was 33 years old, living in New York, and that night was supposed to be my birthday celebration. We were at one of those upscale restaurants with dim lighting and menus you don't see prices on. My mother had insisted on the place. "It feels special," she said, like special was something we could buy if we tried hard enough. Allison, my older sister, arrived late and made sure everyone noticed. She kissed my mother on the cheek, barely glanced at me, and launched into a story about traffic and how exhausting her week had been. I told myself not to expect anything different. I told myself this was fine. For a brief, foolish moment, when Allison handed me the wrapped box, I thought maybe something had shifted. Our father had died 3 months earlier. Grief does strange things to people. I thought maybe this was her way of starting over. I was wrong. After she said it, after the box sat open in front of me, my mother let out a small, nervous laugh and brought her napkin to her lips. She didn't tell Allison to stop. She didn't look at me. She stared down at her plate like the answer might be written in the pasta. I didn't cry. I didn't ask what she meant. I felt cold, the kind of cold that settles deep and stays. Allison leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying herself. "I mean," she continued, lowering her voice just enough to sound reasonable, "it explains a lot, doesn't it?" I closed the box and slid it back toward her. "Happy birthday to me," I said quietly. My voice sounded steady, even to my own ears. The rest of the dinner blurred together. I remember paying the bill because no one else reached for it. I remember my mother thanking the waiter too brightly. I remember Allison checking her phone as if nothing significant had happened. When we finally stood up, no one mentioned the box again. The drive home was silent. My hands shook on the steering wheel. Not from fear, but from a pressure I had carried my entire life finally pushing back. The city lights streaked past my windshield, and the gift sat on the passenger seat like a weight I couldn't put down. As I drove, memories surfaced without permission. Not dramatic ones. Small, sharp moments. The way Allison's opinions always mattered more. The way my mistakes were concerning while hers were phases. The way I learned early to stay quiet because quiet girls didn't cause problems. I grew up in a perfectly respectable American household. Middle class, clean, polite. From the outside, we looked like a family that had it together. Inside, there was an unspoken order. Allison was the center. I was the extra chair pushed against the wall. I learned to make myself useful. I learned to be agreeable. I learned that love in our house came with conditions, and I was never quite sure which ones I had failed to meet. That night, pulling into my apartment parking garage, I sat in the car longer than necessary. I picked up the box and turned it over in my hands. A DNA test. Allison hadn't done this on impulse. This was planned, chosen, timed. She hadn't just wanted to embarrass me. She wanted to plant something, doubt, suspicion, a story she could tell before I ever opened my mouth. I carried the box upstairs and set it on my kitchen counter. My apartment was quiet, safe, mine. I leaned against the counter and finally let myself breathe. If she thought this would make me disappear, she was wrong. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that the sentence she'd thrown at me over dinner kept echoing in my head. "You're not blood family." That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I realized something that scared me more than the test itself. Allison wasn't trying to hurt me emotionally. She was trying to move me, off the board, out of the picture. And whatever was coming next, that box was only the beginning. I learned very early that being quiet made life easier for everyone else. When I was a child, our house was always neat, always controlled, always calm on the surface. My mother liked things orderly, shoes lined up, voices kept low, emotions managed. From the outside, we looked like a normal American family doing everything right. Inside, there was a clear emotional hierarchy, and I sat firmly at the bottom of it. Allison was 3 years older than me, and from the beginning she filled every room she entered. She talked loudly, laughed easily, demanded attention without apology. When she cried, it was treated like an emergency. When she was angry, everyone scrambled to fix it. I watched this dynamic form before I fully understood what it meant, and instinctively, I learned how to stay out of the way. One of my earliest memories is my 8th birthday. I had asked for a chocolate cake. I talked about it for weeks. Chocolate frosting, chocolate filling. I reminded my mother gently, the way children do when they're afraid of asking for too much. She nodded distractedly every time. On the day itself, she brought out a lemon cake with vanilla frosting. Allison clapped her hands. "Lemon is my favorite," she said. My mother smiled at her, that warm smile that reached her eyes. Then she looked at me and said, "Don't be ungrateful, Megan. Lemon is lighter, chocolate is too heavy." I ate the cake. I smiled. I learned that wanting something didn't mean you got to have it. That lesson repeated itself in different forms as we grew up. In school, Allison was impulsive and dramatic. She skipped classes, she argued with teachers. She crashed her car twice before she was 18. Every time something went wrong, my parents reacted with panic and devotion. Lawyers were consulted. Repairs were paid for. Late-night talks happened behind closed doors. I was praised for being easy, for not adding stress, for understanding that Allison needed more support. So I became easy. I studied hard. I kept my room spotless. I never asked for money. I cooked dinner when my mother was tired. I learned to solve my own problems quietly. I believed that if I caused no trouble, I might eventually earn the kind of affection Allison received without effort. By high school, the pattern was fixed. Allison's chaos was considered passion. My discipline was expected. When I was named valedictorian, I felt proud in a way that surprised me. I practiced my graduation speech alone in my room, imagining my parents in the audience. I imagined my mother crying, my father nodding with pride. On the morning of the ceremony, I came downstairs in my cap and gown. My father was reading the paper. My mother was on the phone, her voice tense. She hung up and sighed. "It's Allison," she said. "She's at her boyfriend's place. She says she has a migraine and can't drive." Graduation was in 2 hours. I said that out loud, as if saying it might make it matter. My father stood up and grabbed his keys. "We can't leave her there if she's sick," he said. "Family comes first." I drove myself to graduation. I stood on that stage and delivered a speech about resilience to a crowd of strangers. I scanned the bleachers and didn't find my parents' faces. When I got home later, Allison was on the couch eating ice cream, laughing at the television. Her migraine had disappeared. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. I stopped trying after that, not dramatically, just internally. I moved out as soon as I legally could. I worked 2 jobs through college. I learned how to be independent because I understood finally that there was no safety net waiting for me. If I fell, I would hit the ground alone. Allison never left the orbit of my parents' support. She moved back home more than once. She borrowed money for business ideas that went nowhere. She called them loans. They were never repaid. No one asked her to change. No one expected her to grow up. And yet, despite everything, I kept showing up. Holidays, birthdays, dinners. Some part of me still hoped that time would soften things, that effort would eventually be noticed. I told myself I was being mature. I told myself family was family. Then my father died. It was sudden, a heart attack that didn't leave room for goodbye. At the funeral, Allison cried loudly in the front row, accepting condolences like a performance she knew well. I handled logistics, I spoke to guests, I held doors. I felt strangely hollow. Not because I was heartless, but because I was mourning something I had never really had. After the funeral, something shifted. The house felt different when I visited, sharper. Allison stopped talking about memories and started asking questions. How long does it take to read a will? Who manages accounts now? What happens if things aren't clear? When I brought it up to my mother, she waved it off. "She's grieving," she said. "Don't read into it." But I did read into it, because I had spent my entire life reading the room, adjusting, anticipating. 3 months later, Allison invited me to dinner for my birthday. "Just the three of us," she texted. "A fresh start." I wanted to believe her. I really did. Now, lying awake after the dinner, the words she had thrown at me kept circling back. "You're not blood family." It wasn't just cruelty. It was positioning. It was a line drawn in public, one she expected me to accept without question. For the first time, I wondered if my role in this family had never been accidental at all. The funeral was quiet, in the way expensive things usually are. Soft music played as people filed past the casket, murmuring polite condolences. The flowers were arranged perfectly, the kind you order when you don't want anyone questioning whether you cared enough. Allison sat in the front row dressed in black, shoulders shaking, tears streaking carefully down her face. She accepted every hug, every whispered, "I'm so sorry," like she was receiving awards. I stood off to the side, directing the caterers, answering questions, making sure everyone had a program. I didn't cry in public, not because I didn't feel anything, but because I had learned long ago where emotion was welcome and where it wasn't. People kept telling me how strong I was. I nodded and thanked them. Strength had always been the only role available to me. After the burial, the house filled with relatives and neighbors. Coffee brewed, plates clinked. Allison floated from group to group, recounting stories about Dad with dramatic pauses and soft sobs. I listened from a distance, surprised by how little of him I recognized in her memories. It wasn't that she was lying. She was just telling the version that made her look closest to him. Within days, the tone shifted. The phone calls stopped being about grief and started being about logistics. Allison asked questions that didn't sound like questions. "Do you know how long it usually takes for wills to be read?" she said one afternoon, as if she were asking about the weather. Another time she mentioned accounts, trusts, timelines, always casually, always with a watchful eye on my reaction. Our mother brushed it off. "She's anxious," she said. "Your sister worries. That's how she processes things." But I noticed how quickly the sadness faded for Allison. The black clothes disappeared. Her voice grew lighter. Her attention sharpened. She walked through the house touching furniture, art, silverware, like she was mentally inventorying it. When she spoke about the future, she spoke with certainty, not hope. One evening, while clearing dishes, I overheard her on the phone in the next room. She lowered her voice when she spoke, but not enough. "I just want clarity," she said. "No surprises later." That word stuck with me. Clarity. A few days later, a distant cousin pulled me aside while we stood on the back porch. "These things get complicated," she said quietly, glancing inside. "Especially when people feel entitled. You should make sure you're informed." It wasn't a warning delivered dramatically. It was said gently, almost apologetically. That somehow made it heavier. I tried asking my mother directly about the will one afternoon while she folded laundry. "Have you heard anything from the lawyer?" I asked. She stiffened, then smoothed a shirt with more force than necessary. "It's too soon for that," she said. "We don't need tension right now." Tension. That word was always reserved for moments when Allison was being challenged. I let it drop, but something had already shifted inside me. I started paying attention in a way I hadn't before. I noticed how Allison spoke about Dad's wishes without ever quoting him, how she spoke in conclusions instead of possibilities, how she watched me when she talked about the future, measuring something invisible. When the birthday invitation came, it didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like a step in a process. After the dinner, after the DNA kit and the silence and the drive home, everything clicked into a shape I didn't like. The test wasn't about curiosity. It wasn't about truth. It was leverage. The days that followed were strangely quiet. Allison didn't call. My mother sent a short text asking if I was okay, then nothing else. The box sat unopened on my counter, a reminder that something had been set in motion, whether I participated or not. I replayed the dinner in my head, not emotionally, but analytically. The timing, the audience, the phrasing. Not blood family. Not a question. A verdict. Spoken publicly, so it could never be taken back. I realized then that Allison wasn't reacting to my existence. She was preparing for something ahead. A few days later, I received a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. A man introduced himself as calling on behalf of the estate attorney. He spoke carefully, professionally. "We may need to clarify some matters," he said. "We'll be in touch." Clarify. Another word that landed too heavily to ignore. I stood in my kitchen listening to the message again, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. The DNA box sat where I had left it. I hadn't touched it, but it had already done its job. It had forced me to see what I'd spent years avoiding. I wasn't just the overlooked daughter. I was a variable, something that complicated plans. That night, I lay awake thinking about all the times I'd been told not to make things difficult. All the times I'd stepped back so Allison could step forward. All the times I'd mistaken endurance for safety. Whatever Allison thought she was proving with that test, she had miscalculated one thing. She assumed I would stay confused, ashamed, quiet. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar and steady take root. If there was a truth being hidden, I was going to find it. I couldn't bring myself to throw the box away. For days, it sat on my kitchen counter, pushed slightly to the side like something dangerous I didn't want to touch but didn't dare ignore. Every morning, I told myself I would move it, put it in a drawer, pretend it didn't exist. Every morning I made coffee and my eyes went straight to it. The plastic-wrapped DNA test wasn't curious. It wasn't innocent. It felt like a threat that had learned how to sit quietly. I realized then that Allison never intended for me to take the test immediately. She wanted it there, lingering. She wanted it in my head. The more I thought about that night, the clearer her strategy became. She hadn't humiliated me in private. She had done it in a room full of witnesses. That mattered. Public shame sticks. It spreads. It creates a story before you get the chance to tell your own. By the time I could respond, the idea would already be planted. Megan isn't really one of us. Allison had always understood how to control a narrative. She didn't argue facts. She set scenes. A few days later, I went back to my childhood home under the excuse of picking up some old documents. My mother didn't question it. She never did when I asked for practical things. The house smelled the same, lemon cleaner and something floral, but it felt wrong, like furniture had shifted when no one was looking. I walked through rooms that held decades of quiet compromises. The living room where Allison had always taken the best seat. The hallway lined with framed photos of milestones that never quite included me. I felt like a guest in a place I had once lived. I went into my father's old study. It had been left mostly untouched, as if freezing it in time might preserve something. I opened drawers carefully, telling myself I was only looking for paperwork. That was true, it just wasn't the whole truth. In a filing cabinet, I found folders labeled neatly by name. Allison's was thick, medical records, school certificates, photos tucked into plastic sleeves. Mine was thin. Birth certificate, immunization records, report cards. No photos, no notes, no keepsakes. Just proof that I existed, stripped of any sentiment. I stood there longer than I meant to, staring at the difference. It wasn't neglect by accident. It was omission by choice. I moved to the closet where old boxes were stacked high on shelves. Dust coated the lids. I pulled one down, then another, flipping through albums filled with vacations and birthdays I remembered attending but not starring in. Near the bottom of one box, a single envelope slid out and landed at my feet. Inside was a faded photo of a baby wrapped in a hospital blanket. I knew it was me because of the small birthmark near my ear. The man holding me wasn't my father. He looked younger, dark-haired, his expression soft in a way that made my throat tighten. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me, the kind of look you don't fake. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, were 2 words: "Forgive me." I barely had time to process it before I heard the front door open. "Allison," my mother called from somewhere downstairs. Footsteps followed. Sharp, confident. "What are you doing here?" Allison said, her voice appearing behind me like a blade. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. "I left something here," I said. It wasn't a good lie. She smiled like she knew it. "In Dad's office?" she asked, glancing past me. "Of course you were." "You're snooping," she said lightly, stepping closer, "looking for something that doesn't belong to you." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She already believed she knew the outcome. "You can dig all you want," she continued. "It won't change anything. You were never really part of this." There it was again. Not blood family. I brushed past her and left without another word, the photo burning against my palm in my coat pocket. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. I sat in my car for a long time before driving away, staring at that faded image. The truth wasn't just that I might not share blood with my family. The truth was that someone had cared enough to hide it carefully. That night, I finally opened the box. I followed the instructions with mechanical calm. Swab, seal, label. Each step felt less like a test and more like documentation. I wasn't doing this to prove Allison wrong. I was doing it to understand what she was so eager to erase. When I dropped the package into the mailbox, I felt something shift inside me. A line crossed. The waiting began immediately. Allison sent a single message the next day. "Let me know when you get the results. No question mark, no concern, just expectation." I didn't reply. As the days passed, I replayed conversations I'd once dismissed. The way my mother avoided certain topics. The way Allison spoke about the future as if it were already secured. The way my father had been distant without being cruel, like a man honoring an agreement he never talked about. Whatever the truth was, it wasn't small. And it wasn't about my worth. Lying in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, I understood something with sudden clarity. The DNA test wasn't meant to define me. It was meant to disqualify me. But now that I had stepped into the process willingly, the story no longer belonged to Allison alone. If she thought this would end with me quietly stepping aside, she had misjudged me. I wasn't trying to prove I belonged anymore. I was trying to find out why they needed me not to. The waiting was worse than I expected. Once the envelope disappeared into the mailbox, there was nothing left to do but live my life like nothing was happening. I went to work. I answered emails. I smiled at coworkers. On the surface, everything looked the same. Inside, my mind never stopped moving. Every time my phone buzzed, my chest tightened. Every time my email refreshed, I felt a small jolt of dread and anticipation tangled together. Allison, on the other hand, seemed completely unbothered. 2 days after I mailed the test, she texted me, "Just checking in. Still alive over there?" A smiley face followed, casual and smug. She wasn't waiting for answers. She was waiting for confirmation. The difference mattered. I didn't respond. Silence felt like the only control I had left. At night, I lay awake replaying timelines in my head. My birth. My father's sudden business turnaround shortly after. The distance he kept from me without ever being openly unkind. The way my mother watched conversations instead of participating in them, as if she were always guarding something fragile. The photo I had hidden in my drawer felt heavier with each passing day. 2 weeks later, the email arrived. "Your DNA results are ready." I was sitting at my desk at work, A spreadsheet open on my screen that I hadn't actually looked at in an hour. My hands went cold. I didn't open it right away. I locked my office door first. I needed to be alone with whatever was waiting for me. The website loaded slowly. Bright colors, clean fonts, cheerful language. I scrolled past the sections about ancestry percentages without reading them. I went straight to matches. There were names I didn't recognize, second cousins, distant relatives, no one from my family, no familiar last names. That part didn't surprise me as much as I thought it would. It felt like confirmation of something I had already known without proof. Then I saw the top match. Parent-child relationship. 50% shared DNA. The name underneath made my breath catch. I recognized it instantly, not from personal memory but from headlines, business articles, charity galas. The kind of name that appears in small print at the bottom of big stories. A man known for staying quiet while influencing everything around him. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, not with panic but with clarity. This wasn't a random affair. This wasn't a secret born out of recklessness. This was deliberate. I opened a new tab and searched his name alongside my father's. The results unfolded like a story written backward. Articles from years ago. Financial analyses. One piece stood out, dated the year I was born. My father's company had been on the brink of collapse. Bad investments. Looming bankruptcy. Then, suddenly, an unnamed private investor stepped in. Millions injected quietly. The company survived, flourished. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a transaction. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, my chest tight. I wasn't another man's mistake. I was the price of stability. The condition of a deal that allowed my family to keep its life intact. Everything I had endured took on a different shape. The emotional distance, the careful boundaries. The way my father treated me like an obligation he had agreed to fulfill, not a child he had chosen. The way Allison had always known where power lived in our family, even before she knew why. My phone buzzed. Allison again. "Well," she added, "guess the truth always comes out." She didn't ask what the results were. She didn't need to. That alone told me how long she had known. I didn't reply. I printed the report. I printed the articles. I laid everything out on my kitchen table that night, the photo, the paperwork, the proof. The humiliation I had felt at the restaurant drained away, replaced by something steadier and far more dangerous. Understanding. Allison hadn't given me the DNA test to satisfy curiosity. She had given it to me because she believed she already held the winning hand. She wanted me destabilized before the legal process began. She wanted me doubting myself when it mattered most. What she hadn't anticipated was that the truth wouldn't break me. It clarified me. I thought about calling her. I imagined what I would say. I imagined her reaction. Then I realized confrontation would only give her what she wanted. Noise, emotion, a chance to spin. Instead, I opened my laptop and searched for an estate attorney who had no connection to my family. Someone known for being methodical, not sentimental. I sent an email requesting a consultation and attached nothing. Not yet. This wasn't about proving I belonged. It never had been. It was about understanding the structure that had kept me small and silent for so long. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something that made my pulse slow instead of race. Allison wasn't just trying to take something from me. She was trying to erase the variable she couldn't control. The DNA test didn't disqualify me. It armed me. And when the call from the estate lawyer finally came, I was ready to listen, not plead. Whatever meeting they thought they were calling to manage me, I had already decided one thing. I wasn't going in blind. The call came on a Wednesday morning while I was making coffee. The voice on the other end was calm and professional, the kind that doesn't waste words. He introduced himself as calling on behalf of the estate attorney handling my father's affairs. "We need to schedule an urgent meeting," he said. "There are some matters that require clarification regarding your status." He didn't say what those matters were, but he didn't have to. Allison's fingerprints were all over the timing. I hung up and stood there staring at the coffee maker as it beeped uselessly. This was it. The moment she had been setting up since my birthday dinner. I didn't go in unprepared. That afternoon, I met with an attorney of my own, not a friend of the family, not someone my parents would have trusted. I wanted someone neutral, sharp, and unimpressed by legacy. I laid everything out on the table. The DNA results, the business articles, the photo. He listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back and said, "Do not explain yourself in that meeting. Let them show their hand first." I nodded. I had spent my entire life explaining myself. I was done. The law office was downtown, all glass and steel, designed to make people feel small and careful. I arrived early. Allison arrived exactly on time. She looked confident, dressed sharply, her posture relaxed in a way that told me she believed the outcome was already decided. Our mother followed behind her, pale and tense, clutching her purse like a lifeline. She wouldn't meet my eyes. We took our seats around the table. The estate attorney cleared his throat and began with formalities. Allison didn't wait long. "There's been a discovery," she said, her tone polite but firm, "one that affects inheritance eligibility." She turned slightly toward me, not fully, just enough to remind me I was the subject, not a participant. "It's come to light that Megan isn't biologically related to our father." I watched her carefully. This wasn't emotion. It was performance. The attorney nodded slowly. "Yes," he said. "We are aware." Allison smiled. "Then you understand the implications." "I understand the facts," he replied, "and I understand the will." That was the first crack. He slid a document across the table. "There is an addendum attached to your father's will, one he insisted be included." Allison frowned as she skimmed it. Her confidence faltered, just slightly. "This doesn't change biology," she said. "Blood matters." "It mattered to you," the attorney said calmly. "Your father made a different determination." He read aloud, his voice steady. "The addendum acknowledged that my father had known for years that I was not his biological child. It stated clearly that this knowledge had informed, not altered, his final decisions. He wrote about character, responsibility, integrity. He wrote about watching one daughter build a life without entitlement and another attempt to extract value from everything she touched." Allison's face drained of color. "This is ridiculous," she said sharply. "She manipulated him. She must have." I stayed silent. Letting her unravel felt almost surreal. The attorney held up a hand. "Before we discuss contesting the will, there's more." He reached into a folder and pulled out additional documents: financial records, email transcripts, notes from a private investigator. Allison stiffened. "These materials document unauthorized access to accounts, attempts to influence legal outcomes, and preemptive efforts to undermine other beneficiaries," he said, "most of which occurred before the DNA test was ever mentioned." The room went very still. Our mother gasped softly. "Allison," she whispered. Allison shook her head, backing away from the table as if distance could erase what was happening. "You don't understand," she said. "I was protecting us. I was making sure everything stayed in the family." "You were positioning yourself," the attorney corrected. "And I should also remind you that the will contains a strict no contest clause." Allison's eyes widened. "What does that mean?" "It means that if you challenge this will," he said, "you forfeit your inheritance entirely." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything I had experienced before. Allison turned to me then, really looked at me for the first time since the meeting began. Her voice dropped. "You planned this," she said. "You set me up." I met her gaze calmly. "I didn't have to," I said. "You did that yourself." She laughed, a short, brittle sound. "This isn't over," she said. "I'll fight it." The attorney closed his folder. "You are entitled to consult counsel," he said. "But you should understand the risks. There is sufficient evidence here to escalate matters beyond civil dispute." For the first time, fear crossed Allison's face. The meeting ended without resolution. Dates were set, decisions postponed, but the outcome had already shifted. As we stood to leave, I felt something settle inside me, a certainty that didn't require approval. In the elevator, our mother finally spoke. "I didn't think it would go this far," she said quietly. "It went exactly where it was always headed," I replied. As the doors closed, I caught Allison watching me, her expression no longer smug, no longer confident. She had built her power on assumptions. That day, those assumptions collapsed. Whatever she chose to do next would only determine how much she lost. And for the first time, I understood something clearly. This wasn't about blood. It never had been. The second meeting felt different the moment I walked in. There was no small talk this time, no polite smiles. The conference room was already prepared, folders neatly arranged, chairs aligned like this wasn't a discussion, but a conclusion waiting to be delivered. I arrived early again, not out of nerves but out of habit. I had learned long ago that showing up prepared was the only way to stay standing in rooms like this. Allison came in last. She looked composed at first glance, but the details told a different story. Her shoulders were stiff, her jaw was tight. She sat down too quickly, as if she were afraid the chair might be taken away. Our mother followed her, eyes rimmed red, clutching her purse with both hands. She didn't sit between us this time. She sat closer to Allison, like muscle memory pulling her into position. The estate attorney didn't waste time. "We are here to finalize matters regarding the will," he said, "and to address Ms. Foster's stated intention to contest." Allison straightened. "I have every right," she said. "I'm his biological daughter. That has to count for something." Her voice rose as she spoke, the old tactic creeping back in. Volume, pressure, control. The attorney nodded calmly. "It does count," he said. "Just not in the way you believe." He slid a single-page document across the table. "This is the no contest clause. Your father was very specific. Any beneficiary who challenges the validity of the will forfeits their share entirely." Allison stared at the page. "That can't be right," she said. "I only get a portion anyway. What do I have to lose?" The attorney met her gaze. "Everything." The word landed hard. Our mother inhaled sharply. "Robert never told me about this," she whispered. "He didn't need to," the attorney replied. "It's enforceable." Allison laughed, but it sounded wrong. "You're bluffing," she said. "You can't expect me to just accept this." "I don't expect anything," he said. "I'm informing you." He opened another folder. "These documents," he continued, "detail actions taken by you over the last 2 years. Unauthorized access to joint accounts. Attempts to influence legal counsel. Communications indicating intent to discredit another beneficiary prior to formal proceedings." Allison's face went pale. "That's not what that was," she said quickly. "I was just asking questions." The attorney pressed a button on a small recorder. Her own voice filled the room, sharp and impatient, talking about timelines, about making sure certain people didn't complicate things, about needing the truth on paper before the meeting. Our mother covered her mouth. Allison stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. "Turn that off," she snapped. "You're twisting this." "I'm documenting it," he said. She turned to our mother. "You knew about this?" she demanded. Our mother looked at her hands. "I didn't want things to fall apart," she said quietly. "They already were," I said. Allison swung toward me. "This is your fault," she said, pointing. "You dug into things you didn't understand. You manipulated him. You manipulated everyone." I didn't raise my voice. "I lived my life," I said. "You're the one who tried to erase me." Her breath hitched. For the first time, the confidence cracked completely. "I was protecting what was mine," she said, her voice shaking. "I deserved more. I always did." The attorney closed the folder. "You are entitled to accept the will as written," he said. or you may contest and risk forfeiture and further legal consequences." The room went silent. Allison's eyes darted between us, searching for support, for leverage. There was none left. She sank back into her chair, her shoulders collapsing inward. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "It's honest." The attorney slid a final document across the table. "This acknowledges acceptance of the will. You may review it with counsel, but time is limited." Allison stared at the paper like it was a trap. Her hands shook as she reached for the pen. She hesitated, then signed. The sound of the pen scratching across the page felt louder than it should have. The meeting ended shortly after. As we gathered our things, our mother looked at me, her eyes full of something I couldn't quite name. Regret, fear, relief, maybe all of it. "I didn't think it would end like this," she said. "It didn't have to," I replied. "But it couldn't continue the way it was." In the hallway outside the conference room, Allison caught up to me. Her face was blotchy, her mascara smudged. The polished version of her was gone. "You think you won," she said bitterly. "But you're still alone." I stopped walking and turned to face her. "I've always been alone," I said. "The difference is I'm not confused about it anymore." She looked like she wanted to say something else, but nothing came out. I walked away before she could find new words to throw at me. As the elevator doors closed, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not triumph, not joy, just relief. The truth had done what it always does when it's finally allowed into the room. It didn't scream, it didn't beg. It simply stood there, and everything built on lies collapsed around it. The days after the final meeting were quieter than I expected. No angry messages, no dramatic confrontations, just space, the kind that feels unsettling at first because you're not used to having it. For years, my life had been shaped by reacting to Allison, adjusting to my mother, anticipating disappointment. Now there was nothing to respond to, and that silence forced me to sit with myself. I went back to work the following week and realized how little of the chaos had actually belonged to my everyday life. My job was still there. My routine still worked. I still knew how to take care of myself. Whatever power my family thought they had over me had never followed me into the rest of my world. My mother called a few days later and asked if we could talk. Not meet, just talk. I agreed. She didn't cry this time. She sounded tired, older than she had before. She told me she was sorry, not in a dramatic way, but carefully, like someone afraid of saying the wrong thing. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I told her the truth. I said forgiveness didn't mean access. It didn't mean pretending nothing happened. It meant I wasn't going to live angry forever. I set boundaries calmly, clearly. No money discussions, no emotional pressure, no relaying messages from Allison. If she wanted a relationship with me, it would be built slowly, honestly, or not at all. She agreed faster than I expected, maybe because she finally understood there were no more levers to pull. I didn't hear from Allison again. I heard about her, indirectly, a change of address, a job far below what she once bragged about, a lifestyle that had finally run into reality. There was no satisfaction in it, just distance. And distance, I learned, can be its own kind of mercy. With the estate settled, decisions followed quickly. I didn't rush them. I downsized my hours at work instead of quitting. I moved out of my old apartment into a quieter place that felt like a fresh start instead of an escape. I treated the inheritance like responsibility, not victory. Money doesn't fix wounds, but it can remove pressure, and pressure had shaped too many of my choices already. One afternoon, standing in my new kitchen with the windows open, I thought about that sentence Allison had thrown at me across a restaurant table. "You're not blood family." She had meant it as a verdict, a way to reduce me, to make my entire life provisional. But stripped of her tone, stripped of her intent, the words didn't hold the same weight anymore. Blood hadn't protected me. Blood hadn't shown up when it mattered. Blood hadn't taught me how to survive. I had done that myself. I stopped measuring my worth by who claimed me, and started measuring it by who I had become. Someone steady, someone capable, someone who didn't need permission to exist in a room. There was no dramatic final confrontation, no last words shouted across a parking lot. Just a quiet understanding that the chapter had closed because I stopped trying to rewrite it for other people. Some evenings, I sat on my balcony and watched the city settle into itself, lights coming on one by one. I thought about how many women grow up learning to shrink, to smooth things over, to accept less because family tells them that's what love looks like. I thought about how long it had taken me to understand that love without respect isn't love at all. If you're listening to this and parts of it feel uncomfortably familiar, you're not alone. Being excluded doesn't mean you're lacking. Sometimes it means you were never meant to fit inside something that needed silence to survive. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experience in the comments, or tell me what moment stayed with you the most. And if you want to hear more stories about family, boundaries, and finding your footing after betrayal, stay with the channel. Subscribe, like the video, and come back for the next one. Sometimes the quiet ending isn't the weakest one. It's the first moment you finally get to hear your own voice. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.